Pam Cooley is currently the executive director at the CSA Carsharing association that has been in the car sharing space for over 18 years. She founded CarShare Atlantic in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada in 2008 and sold it to Caminado in 2019. Her consulting company, Choose Ethical Ventures, specializes in professional facilitation, strategic planning, and advice to senior management and engagement of stakeholders in industries that have a positive impact in the world. So thanks so much, Pam, for being here. And now I'm going to introduce, I want to practice my French. So I'm going to introduce Charles de la Chevrotière. Charles is a certified urban planner with over 20 years of experience in urban and transportation planning in both private and public sectors. Strong believer in the power of active mobilities and public transportation in rebuilding the pedestrian realm, Charles is particularly interested in the relation between urban design and the resulting behaviors, the possibilities related to a better sharing of the public space, and in informal strategies applied to urban planning. Since June 2020, Charles has been Executive Director of Business and Mobility Strategies at the new Agence de Mobilité Durable of the City of Montréal. Thanks, Charles, for being here with us. And last but not least, today's speaker and also moderator is Dina Herges. Dina Herges is our Policy Director here at the Parking Reform Network, where he works with our partner organizations to accelerate critical parking reforms through education, organizing, coalition building, and direct advocacy. Prior to coming to PRN, Daniel was editor-in-chief at Strong Towns, and he is a co-author of the book Escaping the Housing Trap. Daniel has a master's in urban planning from the University of Minnesota, and he lives in St. Paul, Minnesota. Now it's time for everyone to give a warm welcome to today's speakers, and I'm going to pass it to Daniel.
Thank you, Paula. I am honestly much more excited to get on to our featured guests today, but part of the purpose of this webinar and why we're so excited to do it is to deepen the links between the parking reform community and the car sharing community, and then to talk about some best practices in promoting more varied and on-demand mobility and some of the great work they're doing in Montreal around that. So I want to take just a couple minutes, talk about what those connections are, and for those in outside of our PRN community, and especially for those in the car sharing community who are seeing this, make sure I give a little bit of introduction to what PRN is and what parking reform is and what we do. So I'll take just a couple minutes for that, and for our PRN regulars, this will be maybe a little bit of old news, but I'll try to be brisk with it. Let me share my screen here for a second. The Parking Reform Network. I feel like this exact language was in my bio that Paula just read, but we accelerate the adoption of critical parking reforms through research, coalition building, and direct advocacy. The reason that there is a parking reform network is that parking reform is an issue that, somewhat uniquely draws really, really eclectic coalitions because it touches on everybody's priority. And so, these are the kinds of partners that we work with, the kinds of partners we see supporting parking policy reform because they are impacted by the dysfunctional parking policy that is the norm right now. And you can see I took an existing slide that shamefully didn't have car sharing organizations in our kind of alternative mobility category. So I have added that and highlighted it because absolutely part of the picture here. But parking reform sits at this nexus where parking is so often, the reason that you can't have nice things, the reason that you can't achieve your goals, whether they are environmental and climate goals, whether they're transportation, whether they're housing, etc. And so we seek to connect all those advocates and practitioners and equip everybody with the best perspectives, messaging, data, research, etc. To make the case. Ultimately, the reason that there is a need for parking reform is that you ask the average person, what do you think about parking? Well, I like it when I don't have to pay for it, and I like it when it's available when I need it. But free or oversupplied excess parking has all of these costs that ripple through every aspect of society, from the cost of rent to the ability to be a small local entrepreneur, to the difficulty in navigating a city when you don't own a car. Um, and so our work is heavily indebted to that of Professor Donald Shoup, the late Donald Shoup at UCLA, who wrote the book The High Cost of Free Parking, and really pioneered the research of all of these costs that are baked into society, that come when we don't value parking and manage it appropriately, and instead end up oversupplying it and requiring its oversupply. Um, and so we've sought to document that through providing research tools, mapping tools. One of the things that PRN is best known for is these maps that we produce. We have a small army of volunteers continuing to expand our library of parking lot maps that simply show you where all the surface parking is, or the land dedicated to parking in your downtown. Um, and almost invariably, it's way more land than anybody thinks it is. It's a huge drain on the tax base. It's a huge drain on walkability. And at the same time, people still complain that they can't find parking when they need it. Um, so this can be really eye-opening for people. Parking that is unmanaged, oversupplied, where we err on the side of excess, ends up crowding out everything else. It crowds out the stuff of urban life. As this illustration by Alfred too shows, when you look at common commercial parking mandates, for example, um, one space per 500 square feet to 250 to 100, you're getting to the point, embedded in zoning codes, embedded in standard practice, where more land is devoted to the accommodation and storage of automobiles than to whatever it is you actually came there to do. Um, Parking crowds out human scale communities. It crowds out business activity, local walkable destinations, the stuff of life, quite literally. It crowds out living space. Um, and so ultimately, it's not just about, are we charging the right price? Charging the right price is a vehicle. Getting rid of parking mandates is a vehicle toward getting to a world where people have more choices, including the option of low car mobility. And I think that's really where the nexus with car sharing is how do we create a world of options? Parking is expensive. It translates directly into the cost of rent, into the cost of living. We need to make it possible for people who want to live a car light lifestyle, who don't want to maintain and pay for storage for their own private vehicle all the time, to have that option. One of the biggest things PRN does is we support campaigns to reduce or eliminate mandatory parking minimums. And we've seen massive success over the last decade, still much, much work to be done. But in the US and Canada, there has been an exponential trajectory. These numbers are just from the US and they don't include last year. We're well over 100 cities now with no off-street parking mandates. That's step one. But there's way more to parking reform than eliminating your off-street mandates. It is managing the curb to ensure that parking is priced appropriately, that there are incentives not to oversupply, and at the same time that it's actually available when you need it. And there's a lot of parking management that is required, I know, to make things like car sharing a success. I think there's a symbiotic need here. You need to get the policy environment right in order to create the kind of community and the kind of options where people might actually decide, hey, I don't need to own my own car. And I don't need to have that space, that highly expensive space reserved for it all the time. So that leads us right into the topic of our webinar today. And I am very excited to hand it over to Pam Cooley from the Carsharing Association.
Thank you, Daniel. And I'm so glad that you did this, because I really think that what this is about, I'm just going to share my screen and we'll talk a little bit about car sharing. So the idea here today is, for me, is so here's me. And the objective for today for me, and for why I just love this collaboration, is that I want the Parking Reform Network is just extraordinary. I think I found it through another webinar and looked it up and thought, this is a natural partner for us. And so today's objective is for CarShare people to understand what the Parking Reform Network is doing, so they can collaborate with people who are in their local area, and for the Parking Reform Network to understand more about what's going on with car sharing. So because we do have mutual values and principles and mandates. And so if you know a little bit more about car sharing, then it'll be easier to put it into your pitches and use it as another way for people to understand what we're going for. So our CSA is based on, it was started in 2010. It was based on committing to transit-oriented urban mobility. This is our 2010 mission statement. We haven't changed very much. But what we engage, collaborate, and learn and solve. So basically, it's for CSOs, but it's also for the ecosystem. So if you have anything to do with car sharing, you're welcome to join us. You're welcome to use our resources. Please join our newsletter and learn more about what's going on, because it's all integrated. We can't do one without the other. But the key is that it's based on an environmental and social impact. Just because we can do technology doesn't mean that we should. And so, I mean, this is another webinar I just did recently about that. It's like, just do what works and has an impact and measurable impact. So this is what we do. We support two-way and one-way car sharing and innovations around those within the shared mobility ecosystem, because it is a system and we want people to understand that. The parking reform I read on your, and I know that Daniel just gave us it, but like these two things just stood out for me when I was reading about the parking reform and your mandates. Equitable, efficient, sustainable management of existing parking supply relates to car sharing, absolutely, because we do need parking, but we also reduce parking. So what is shared mobility? Basically, this is the context in which hopefully people know this already, but in terms of car sharing, it's accessing a service for transportation, whatever it is, but without owning a car. And so more options, the better. And we look at all the different options that we have so far: car sharing, ride sharing, ride pooling, carpooling, van pooling, bike sharing. We have it all. And if your city has all of these things, that has a bones for great mobility, integrated mobility plans. So what is car sharing? Car sharing is just a car that you drive yourself on demand. So everything is on demand right now. And so is car sharing. Car sharing is cars on demand when you need it, and you only pay for it when you use it. And you can reserve in advance, and so you pick it up at an advanced time and you bring it back in an advanced time, so you know it's reliable and it's there. And but also we have one way, which is you can just look on your app and see if there's a car available and just walk down the street and get it. It's the only, I would put forth that it's the only mobility mode that you drive yourself that replaces personally owned vehicles. And what I mean by that is that everybody's looking to mode shift in their cities. But if they don't have car sharing, it's way more difficult, because what are you going to use when you need a car? So this is the option and it's usually in residential areas or in buildings in the neighborhood. It's your neighborhood car, and there's many of them. So ideally, a car share organization has cars within 5 or 7 minutes of each other, minimally. And so there's always a reliable car there for you if you need it. Now, what are the impacts of car sharing? Reduces congestion. Now, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, so you can refer back to them if you need it. And there's lots of resources to help you develop this or put this into your pitches as well. So reduces congestion. For every car share car that's on the road, usually takes about 10 to 15 cars off the road. So for example, here in Halifax, we have 350 cars. So that's about 3,000 to 4,000 cars off the road, because car sharing exists in Halifax in the urban core. Pretty damn good. So if you use cars less, lowers emissions, supports transit. If you don't have a car, you use transit more. Enhances accessibility. If you can't afford a car, obviously people who have access to a car have more opportunities. So it provides that for it as well. Efficient land use. I'm not going to go into that because I know that Charles will. And cost savings for cities. Again, I know that Charles will go through that. So here's your list if you want to integrate car sharing into your pitches around parking reform. Who's affected? It's just a win-win-win-win all the way. If you don't have car sharing in your city, I would be advocating for it in order for your parking reform to even be that much more potent. These are all on my website, carsharing.org. I'll put that in the, or maybe Paula, you can put that in the chat. It's, you can click on them and see more about what each of those stakeholders and why they benefit from it. And I think Charles will also probably go into that as well. But it's a system, and it's an integrated system. And if you have a strategy for each of these things, then it works well. Again, if you measure technology and car sharing and all the other modes, it's important to measure the impact. And I think this is what cities don't do. And if you measure the impact, then you'll actually recognize that policy relates to measurement, which relates to your objectives. And sometimes we forget about that. So if you want more cars, widen streets. If you want less cars, then look at shared mobility. So policies, so we're getting into the parking part here, and that's like policies that we actually need parking policy in cities. We need it, and so, but it's to advantage the car sharing organization and curbside. And I know that Charles is going to get into that as well, but this is what we need. We need all the elements in place in order for car sharing just to come in and grow. If that environment is not in place, then we can't do our job. And it's the lowest hanging fruit that cities have. If cities have policies in place that support car sharing, we just grow. We don't have to keep on going back and forth. And we're their natural partners for cities, but they're slowly getting it. And that's why we brought Montreal in too. So these are some of the car sharing policies that we need. Secure parking permits, dedicated on-street or off-street parking stalls for car sharing, integrated car sharing into development approval, public support for electric vehicles, and mobility hubs. Now I'm going to leave it at that because I know that Charles has, and I, the thing is about bringing in Montreal. I love what they're doing in Montreal, which is why I'm introducing Charles to, because the Agence de Mobilité, my French is worse than anybody's. I just see them as best practice. And so I wanted to show you a model for that. And that's why we're bringing Charles in. I just want to say also that please become a member. I wouldn't be doing my job also, Paula, if I didn't invite people to be a member. You can be any kind of member if this fits in with you. And you can find those on carsharing.org. And you can look at the benefits that are there. I'm not going to go through them now, but you can do that. And if you have any questions, then you can reach me. I just also want to say to come to our conference in October in Vancouver, Canada, from October 5th to 6th. It's just about car sharing. Like a lot of mobility conferences have all the mobility options. This is just about car sharing. So if you want to know more about car sharing or have a reason to network with car sharing folks, then please come and join us there. Thanks, everyone. I'll stop sharing. And I'm going to hand it over to Charles.
Yes, it's my turn. Thank you, Pam. I'm putting all this pressure on me. I have all these.
I know.
I have
but
all these elements.
It's you're the best. So don't worry. I love it.
Okay. No pressure. Bonjour from Montreal, everyone. Very happy to be here today. Let me share the screen. Is it working? No, it's not. So
Yep, it is.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we
I'm
can
not
see it.
seeing it. Oh, you can see. It's too bad I can't see. I would like to see what I'm showing. All right, just go like this. All right, so very happy to introduce you to the Agence de Mobilité Durable, literally the Sustainable Mobility Agency in Montreal. We're a fairly new organization, but there we go. But we are 5-year-old. But however, we have been able to accomplish quite a few things over the last few years. My presentation will be in 3 parts. First, I'll give you a quick overview of what the agency is. Also, I always like to actually introduce people why the agency was actually created. And I'll go through a few of our ongoing projects. Yeah, so that's it. The agency at a glance. Well, for those who don't know Montreal, Montreal loves its sustainable mobility. We are the birth city of Bixi. Outside of Montreal, it's known as PBSC, or now Lyft Urban Solution. So the City Bikes in New York, the former Boris Bikes and now Santander Bikes in London. Those are cities where the Big C was deployed, exported. So yeah, big network here in Montreal on the share bike system. Communauto, Pam brought it up in her presentation. We have most probably the biggest car sharing community in North America. Montreal was also the first city to have a completely electric vehicle taxi fleet. So very proud of it, the TO taxi. And the last administration invested quite a bit in a bike network that is fully separated called the REV, Réseau Express Vélo. So it's now going throughout the city, taking a full lane and fully protected from cars. So what is the agency? Essentially, we are a non-profit corporation created back in 2020, January of 2020. Essentially, the idea of creating the agency came up when the city adopted in 2016 their parking strategy. At that time, the parking was not managed by the city, but was actually managed by the Chamber of Commerce. It had been the case for since 1995, and the deal was for 25 years, therefore the 2020 date. What it means to be a nonprofit corporation is essentially that all of our operating and capital budget are reviewed, approved, and provided by the city. And we also have an independent board, but all the members are nominated, confirmed by the City of Montreal. There are two elements that make our governance very unique in Montreal. The first one is the merger of Parking Montreal, which was the management unit at the Chamber of Commerce. And the city merged that unit with the parking enforcement division of the Montreal Police Department. So that is, strangely, that is very unique because usually police department are in charge of enforcing parking. In some other cities, you might see public works do it. In Europe, it's usually either the municipal police or it's privatized. Either way, these three types of enforcing units usually have very different business objectives. The fact that enforcement is now within the authority or the agency that manages parking changes things completely, because now we can intervene much quicker on when there is, for example, dangerous parking. Let's say there's a truck in a bike lane. Before that, you would call the police. Police would come, but maybe later and the vehicle had left. In our case, we can intervene fairly quickly and then eliminate that issue. The other key element that makes our governance completely unique in the world, well, in the Western world at least, all the parking revenue are not the agency's revenue. All the revenues goes back to the City of Montreal. And that is a key element because all the decisions that we take are mobility oriented. Contrary to other parking authorities elsewhere or parking agencies elsewhere, where they keep the revenue and send back a portion of their revenue to the city. In our case, because all the revenue goes back to the city, when we recommend interventions to the city, they're always the mobility oriented. We evaluate the revenue impact to the city, and then the city decides if they go ahead with this recommendation or not. The agency's mission, essentially, well, I said it previously, parking management and enforcement. We also maintain the public EV charging network. Taxi is now part of our jurisdiction. Of course, taxi needs taxi stands, pickup areas, and drop-off zones. And we also have the mission to innovate and change practices when it comes to planning mobility. So I'll give a quick overview of this in my presentation. I won't go through all these numbers, of course, but there are two numbers that I want to highlight. First one is the upper left one, charging station, level 2 charging station. We have about more than almost 1,500 now These are numbers from the year prior. But in Montreal invested quite a bit in electrifying, installing EV chargers, level 2 chargers, but 83% were put on the curbside. Of course, it's unsustainable to continue implementing EV chargers on the curb. The curb is needed for many purposes. And also, electric motorists need more and more level 3 chargers. They can't leave their car. Level 2 chargers are too slow. So these chargers, level 3 chargers, the fast chargers, are pretty big equipment, and you'll see how we're actually implementing them in our Mobility Hubs network. The other number that I want to showcase is the lower right number. We have a payment app that is essentially just used to payment, and we hope to transform this app into a mobility app. Right now, this app is used by more than 800,000. Actually, this number is also old. I think we're closer to 1 million now. So very, very happy about it. And I will give you an overview of our digital strategy with our app. So why did the City of Montreal created the agency? I love to start answering that question by showing old pictures of about just 100 years ago. These pictures are from maybe 1917, 1919, just before the last pandemic, actually. So you could see the street were actually used by everyone. You had plenty of pedestrians, cars were starting to appear. You had trolleys, trams, horse-drawn carriage, motorbikes, bicycle. So the streets were for everyone. But very quickly in the 20s, cities decided very quickly, 1922, 23, 24, 25, that it was a massive decision to actually give the street to cars. Cars, of course, were the symbol of modernity, progress, and it was, everybody agreed we need to give that space to the car. And there was also the argument of, we need to protect the pedestrian because cars, when they hit a pedestrian, they hurt them. Of course, that did not turn out so well. And of course, when what comes with cars, came parking, and of course, all the overabundance of parking. And that overabundance is most probably just the result of a highly fragmented industry. Parking is an extremely fragmented industry. And you have public, you have private, and within the public, every city is a different orientation. Within the city of Montreal, we have 19 boroughs that don't manage parking the same way. So this gives you an example. A city can have very progressive policies, but if the neighbor doesn't, we're not actually helping the cause. And of course, we all know that abundant and affordable parking at the destination is a number one factor for modal choice. So some ongoing project, first, curbside management. Paid parking is only one function of the curbside. And that's something we tend to forget. So these are numbers actually from Montreal. Let's think about a high frequency bus line. That's about 1,000 passengers boarding and alighting per day, per stop. Paid parking in Montreal is about 18 cars a day. Terraces, we love to put terraces in the summer. We take that space on the street. We have 6 months of winter, of course. So that's about 100 clients supporting local businesses. EV charging in the curb, like I said, the level 2, they're slow chargers. That's about three clients. We have the big C stations. That's micromobility. That's about 50 clients. My point here with this slide is actually for that very same space on the street, you have different values, okay? But for the last 100 years, we never really bothered evaluating that value. Actually, one thing with parking is that we know very little about parking. We have very little knowledge. At best, we have empirical knowledge when it comes to parking. So we need to digitalize if we want to manage the curb, of course, we actually need to know what we're managing. And this is why digital inventory of the curb is necessary. Unfortunately, this is a real picture here in Montreal, and it's not unique across cities in North America. Usually signage are partial, obstructed, they're damaged, or incomprehensible. So this is the challenge that cities that wants to manage their curbside have, and they need to actually make this digital inventory. What is curbside management? Well, like I said, it starts with digital inventory. That's an ongoing project here at the agency. Once we know what we can manage, well, then we can allocate it and optimize it. From there, we can actually inform motorists how to use it and facilitate the payment, not only paid parking, but also for deliveries, also for the usage of that space, for residents, for visitors, for professionals, for nurses working with clients at home. And then, of course, we can enforce that space. And with the data collected from payment, from enforcement, we can then monitor the performance of the curb, which helps to optimize, again, the space of the curb. Our second project are mobility hubs. Pam brought it up just earlier. Of course, we know that on-street and off-street are both communicating vessels. So in Montreal, what we suggested to the city was to use the city real estate because they have plenty of parking lots and convert them into hubs. What are hubs in Montreal? Where our definitions is that they are attractive, comfortable, and safe place, where we can concentrate a range of sustainable mobility services in a space integrated into their neighborhood and the daily life of the population. There are essentially three elements that compose our hubs. We have mobility services, so taxi, paid parking, parcel lockers, bike, electric charging, car share, transit if close to it. We have placemaking notion as well as an information and signage component. This is our first hub. This is what it looked like before. Very banal parking, nothing fancy about it. This is what it became. Masson Street Hub. So you can see the pavers, they're light colors. So they reduce the reflection during a hot heat event in the summer. So this lot is what we call an eco-responsible lot. The pavers actually also absorb the rainwater. There's quite a lot of vegetation, as you can see. So it reduces the heat island, but it also absorbs the rainwater, and so it can actually replenish the water table. You can see here our level 3 chargers, big. They're very big, and we cannot put those on the curb, as you can imagine. We have a dedicated car share parking. This is our second hub and the biggest so far, the Boyer Street Hub. This is actually a very good picture. Like cars are immobilized, as we all know, 97% of their existence. Well, car park are empty 90% of their existence, or even more of that. And this is a good example. So if we want to convert this land and transform it into an eco-responsible space, well, we have a pretty good observation here of how much space we could allocate. So this is a rendering, and I got some pictures after that. This hub was opened last fall. So you can see you got some waiting area to socialize. This is actually an element that residents love at every corner. We have the Big C station, and Big C is going more and more. They're going 4 seasons now. So they actually need to go off street because, of course, of the snow removal operation. So they need that space off street. We have the car sharing dedicated space. Again, car share need space. Communauto, they're always open to expand their service, but they don't have the parking space for it. We have in the middle of the lot a biofiltration retention basins and different element parcel lockers, all the EV charging station. These are some pictures of that lot. Again, light colored absorbing pavers. You have this place making element. You have the EV chargers here. We also the information and payment. This is our digital strategy. So right now, we all know that trip planners lie to you. They lie to motorists. If you use your car, trip planners never consider the time associated with parking. It would be like the car appears in front of your house and disappears at your destination. But we know that public transportation need to provide a very precise information when it comes to waiting time on board, transfer time, walking time. Even TNCs will give you the time that you might wait for your expected car. Now, what would happen if we were able to actually provide the real time associated to using your car, and when motorists they plan their trip, we tell them, well, you want to use your car, you can use it, go ahead. But the odds, the chances that you find a space at a destination are very little. You might have to actually go park 10 minutes further. Well, in that case, maybe in this case, transit becomes more interesting, or biking becomes more interesting. So this element of decision, of helping, informing motorists to take the right decision is actually key in the development of our app. Today, our app is only a payment app, but tomorrow it will become an aid to trip planning for motorists. The idea is also to put in contact motorists with multimodal information. Because right now, I used to be in the public transportation industry. We always, everybody was talking about the mass, some still do. It's like if it was the perfect solution. We'll make it so easy that motorists will actually just switch to transit. Well, that's not how it works, because motorists, most of them don't actually understand how the transit system works. Even myself, that use transit my whole entire life, sometimes I go to cities, I look at their map, I look at their schedule, and it's hard for me to understand. So imagine somebody that never used it and has the facility of using their cars right outside their house. And last project that we have, enforcement, where it's leveraging the license plate recognition technology. So LPR technology was developed, of course, for mostly parking enforcement. But what we do that is really cool at the agency, and we've developed a very unique expertise in North America, and most probably even in Europe, is we use the LPR, we transform that enforcement technology and transform it into a curb use analysis. So we're able to acquire occupation rates that usually is very hard to get. And if you do get it, the traditional way was to get somebody to count the number of cars on a Tuesday morning and on a Thursday afternoon, and there you go. That's the number you have. Every studies that we do have at least 500,000 license plate surveyed. So we get so much data. We get the parking duration. We also get the vehicle categorization. And we can also derive the origin. We have the origin of the vehicle, so we can actually derive the motive of the trip, of the parking, which is usually unavailable in every transit studies or transportation study. So that's it. I'm stopping here and stop sharing.
Thank you so much to both of you. We have some time for Q&A. Anybody in our audience, if you have a question, you can feel free to post that in the chat. If you'd rather ask it out loud, Zoom has a little raise hand button in the toolbar. Feel free to raise your hand. We'll direct as many of your questions to our presenters as we can here. I will start with one that I see in the chat from Lindsay Francis, and this is directed at Charles. Lindsay writes, I'm curious about the agency's work in suburban contexts. How are these concepts being shared, applied in more suburban areas that are under the authority of the city of Montreal? And then part two of this was issues related to Montreal being a very demerged city. Does your agency leverage the Agglomeration Council for cross-city collaboration on the island of Montreal? If not, is this something that might be leveraged in the future to provide a more seamless experience across the island of Montreal?
All right.
Yeah.
So two very good questions. So the city of Montreal has 19 boroughs and 24 cities in total, I think. So for the more suburban or the less dense portion of the city of Montreal, so the eastern boroughs and some, mostly in the east end of the borough or northwest, for those who know the island of Montreal, we're actually making studies for that. Because while maybe it's not their entire territory that is impacted, or they might not be pressure on parking throughout the territory, they do have some portions of their territory or their borough that they owe to convert. And don't forget, these boroughs or cities, suburban cities, especially the older ones, they're actually trying to rebuild themselves by densification, by developing new residential development. And they're trying to understand like what will be the impact on residents now, on parking now, and what will be, and how can we actually mitigate these impacts. They also, when we do studies, so we've done actually we do as many studies in the central neighborhoods of Montreal that are the densiest as we do studies in suburban Montreal. So the agency right now can only operate on the island, so what we call the agglomeration of Montreal. And we did projects with de-amalgamated cities, Montreal West and Montreal East and Westmount. So Westmount not yet, but we're talking. So we're already doing some projects on some of the suburban cities of Montreal, and we did with the more suburban boroughs of Montreal. And they're hoping to actually better understand the impact of parking because, like I said, there's no knowledge on when it comes to parking. And other studies that we do, so there's a real estate development studies, but also everything when it comes to implementing reserve bus lane for the STM, which is the transit operator here. In the east of Montreal, which is very less dense, the Montreal Transit Authority is actually planning a massive transit project. So we're part of that study because they need to understand how will that project impact on parking on the street notably. And we also when their cities or boroughs implement bike lanes, so again same thing, how will that impact delivery, how will that impact people with reduced mobility, etc. Oh, and by the way, spoiler alert, there's never any need for parking. There's always plenty of parking. So it's and the fact that we use this very precise technology using GPS and using license plate, our results are almost surgical. We can actually go see. We have like at the street corner almost. We can know exactly how that car is used. We can go see the business user and say, business owner, and say, this is how that spot is used. Most of the time by himself. And say like this, this will be the impact on your business. So we're very, very detailed, very, very, very precise.
And if I can jump in for a second, thank you so much for answering all of that. I'm from the West Island of Montreal. I grew up in Kirkland, lived there most of my life. So I'm almost equally interested in that region of the island because I think that's where the majority of demerged cities in fact are. So that's why this cross collaboration of things is especially interesting to me. And as someone who used to go to council meetings every month in Kirkland, for example, have over the years heard many, and I know Kirkland not being part of City of Montreal, but being on the island, exceptions granted to parking, providing more parking than necessary, things like this. So just, with Pierrefonds being part of City of Montreal, I'm just curious, especially in that context, and with a lot of new building that's happening on the West Island, kind of, how these things are playing out in other regions of Montreal. And I haven't heard that much actually about the West Island yet, where I think that there's a lot of opportunity to reduce forced car dependency or forced personal car dependency and promote car sharing as well as multimodal transit.
What is the question exactly, or was it just a comment?
Oh, sorry, you mentioned a lot of examples, but I guess we don't have a lot of time left, so I don't want to monopolize too much. I was wondering if you had any information on the West Island, even specifically, because my
no. Well, like I said, there's nothing. There's no knowledge and there's no information. There's no data. The last survey that I know of all off-street parking on the island of Montreal was done by the Department of Transportation back in 1998. It was extremely detailed, but that's it. There's nothing since.
Okay.
Cities, unfortunately, don't really keep that information. Smaller cities of the West Island, they barely manage, or it's not unique to the West Island. It's usually. I mean, there's no pressure on parking. Like I said, if you don't have pressure on parking, you won't manage it, and you'll have a few complaints here and there. I mean, everybody's got their driveway in suburbia, and they still park on the street. So anyway, there's
Yeah.
very little data, but over the last 5 years, we've been able to acquire quite a lot of data on parking, and we're proud to start using it to better understand behaviors and motorist behaviors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Um,
Any other questions?
I see one more in the chat right now. We welcome any other questions for Charles or for Pam as well. Corey Bell from Philadelphia asked, do you have reports you can share? This is directed to Charles as well. Do you have reports you can share about travel behaviors based on enforcement?
Well, sorry. The best thing would be actually to maybe contact me, and we could like have a little meeting with the data analysis team, the data science team, and give you some because they're all independent studies, and you know, we're doing it for a client. So, but we would be happy to share you some result, and eventually we will want to actually publish some conclusion. But right now, what we have are studies made for clients, either cities or boroughs. So the sharing is limited, but we would be happy to showcase or explain to you what we do and provide you with some conclusions.
Well, maybe just to wrap it up, if there are no more questions, you know, after listening to this presentation, you know, I'm as the CSA Carsharing Association and learning about the parking reform network, it just I'm even more convinced now that that the idea of shared mobility and the parking reform are so hand in hand. And I'm not sure how much, and this is, I guess, maybe a question to Daniel, maybe a statement and question at the same time, is that shared mobility and, you know, not just car sharing, but car sharing, of course, is relating to parking and, you know, land use, and of course, but do you use shared mobility as one of your arguments for parking reform at this point in time, or is there more work to be done in that, or and maybe there's more collaboration there in the future? I'm not sure, but you know, I just think that how people move, especially with cars, is definitely related, because if you reduce the use of cars and the need for parking, and to help the argument with parking reform. So it's sort of a statement and a question, Daniel, maybe.
Yeah, I think we do. I think there's a, you know, we will meet people where they are. One thing that we've found in terms of the politics of parking reform in places that are currently very car dependent, where people maybe don't envision a world in which they wouldn't feel like they need to own their own car. We find that the politics of parking reform are such that you don't want to come right out the gate with, this is so you don't have to own a car. Like, that scares people a little bit. It's like, oh, this is some anti-car or radical policy, which it really isn't. But you know, if you frame it that way,
Framing
the
is
point of this
important.
policy is to get people out of their cars. It actually scares away a lot of people who would find benefit in parking reform, in better parking management. So we will often say, you know, this is, especially the curb management, explicitly like, this is to enhance your mobility options. So you have more alternatives, so you have more convenience.
Yeah.
And even for drivers, even if you are driving your personal car, managing the curb is so that you can find parking when you need it. You're not circling the block. You don't have any anxiety. And it seems to me that once you can get, you know, if you can frame the conversation around, this is actually so you have the option to travel the way you want to travel and exist the way you want to exist in a city that is a great place to be, then you can have lots of conversations with people. And shared mobility at that point, I think, becomes a little less scary, and it becomes actually kind of exciting. I mean, I
mean, if you frame it such that it's meeting their goals, and they haven't integrated those you know, shared mobility plans or integrated mobility plans, and then it is a way to show that that they relate, you know.
Yeah. I think one question I had for you, Pam, if we've still got, we're kind of at we're nominally at 1 minute left here, but I wanted to get my question into you here with regard to car sharing is sort of, as an evangelist for car sharing to those who are less familiar, maybe a little bit more skeptical. Like, I think the skepticism that I hear, and it's the same skepticism about a lot of things, like owning a car for people, it is certainty. It is the comfort of, I can go where I want, when I want. And the hesitation that people have around something like car sharing is maybe I can't go where I want when I want. What if I can't? What if there isn't critical mass in the system and when I need that car, it's not there or it's a half-hour walk from where I am, or if I don't have the guarantee that this will be a service that is useful to me.
Yeah.
I think people get hung up on that. I'm curious your reaction to that. I guess this is a twofold question as well. One is how you broach that in just sort of like evangelizing for these programs and these systems to people. But also, what do you need to see from parking policy, even short of sort of the best in class example of Montreal with mobility hubs and all that? What do you need from the municipality to help a car sharing service provide that certainty to people? That you're going to know how to get.
It's a really good question. Really great question. And a lot of it depends on where you are. So for in Vancouver, as an example, you can park on street because it doesn't snow there, right? So we have permits to park on street year round. Whereas in Montreal, that's not the case. Not the case because they have parking reform. Like they have.
We do both. We park on the street
You
as
do
well.
both, yeah. So where it's appropriate, you can do both. Like have the, on street. So permits to be on street in your neighborhoods or in the building. So when I was starting car share here in Halifax, nobody knew what the hell it was at all. And so I started working with the developers. And I said, do you have problems with your parking? And the ones that were actually, building, so I could tell them that they could save millions of dollars on parking and also, have memberships for your apartment dwellers. And so they have a second car option, like there's different ways. So for residents, you need it. You're definitely right. You need reliability. That's why we have reserved cars. So you reserve it for the time that you want it and you bring it back when you know that you're going to be back. Now there's some limitations in that, but most people deal with that. The benefits outweigh that. And then we have one-way car sharing. So you look on your app and there's one maybe like 2 minutes away. You click on it and you can reserve it for half an hour and you just get to it. So that's very convenient. So if car share organization has both, or if there's a city that has both, like Vancouver and Montreal, is that's ideal. That's for the resident. For the cities, it's everybody's complaining about congestion. Everybody's complaining about, parking and there's no place to park conveniently. But for cities, what it does is that we need from them is permits to park in different areas and to convince them that actually by having that, then you're going to have less cars coming down and more cars movement in the areas. So what we need is actually most cities need bylaw changes because of just the emphasis on parking for cars. So we need permits to have for every car to be on the road in some way, shape, or form. So that's what we need. And we have policies that are available, like drafts kind of thing for people to take with them. So I just want to give you another example, like Carshare, Zipcar just pulled out of London. And the reason why they pulled out of London is because the parking was not available. They weren't able to expand because the different boroughs, this is just like what Charles talked about, the different boroughs have different parking policies. And so if you can't deal with parking policies all at once, so you can just expand and you're spending your time trying to advocate for each borough, and Zipcar got fed up and left. So, but the problem with that is that when Zipcar leaves, car sharing gets the brunt of it, saying that car sharing doesn't work, when it actually does. And so these are the kind of problems that we face as an organization and as an industry as well. So I hope that answers.
If I may add, my family never owned a car. I still don't own a car. We have 2 kids. Car sharing cannot, and we're members of Community, of course, but car sharing cannot carry the burden of, your entire mobility, So you need to live in a multimodal city like Montreal. So most of the time I walk and I use transit. Sometimes I will use the bike. But if I'm going to Costco or IKEA, of course I'm taking a car. If we're going out for the weekend, so it depends. In taxi, we use the taxi quite a bit. So you need to be able to actually have different. You choose your mode according to what you need to do.
Yep. It's a multimodal system that works best. And your transit has to also work really well. So thanks. I love this collaboration, and I'm hoping that people join the Carsharing Association's newsletter and get some information there. And I hope that the carsharing people join the Parking Reform Network and get their information there. I think it's a natural collaboration. So I just want to say thank you to Paula, you and Daniel and Jordan for just agreeing to do this. It's great.
Thank you so much, Pam. I'm just going to wrap real quick this webinar. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining this network, joining this webinar. I also believe it's a natural collaboration, Pam. So thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Charles, for being with us today. And yeah, so thanks, everyone. I'm just going to copy paste real quick in the chat the links to the calendar and to join our network. And a small feedback form. We love to read your comments. If there's things to improve, things to change, we also love that. So feel free to answer that. And I also left in the chat the links to the Agence de Mobilité Durable de Montréal and the one for the CSA Association. So you can also find those links there. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to close the session.
Thanks, Paula.
Au revoir, bonne journée.
Bye-bye. Au revoir.